Welcome back to the second episode of David Reacts to Shit on the Internet. Viral videos. David reacts to viral videos on the Internet. Now, if you're new here, my name is David Colarossi. I'm a licensed psychologist, and for fun, I run this channel where I use events in pop culture to talk about concepts in psychology. And today, we're of course going to talk about Tom Sandoval's interview with the New York Times Magazine. We'll talk about Meri Brown's new business venture, and then some smaller viral clips from Pearl and a dad who's teaching his son how to deal with his phobia of chickens. So let's start with the funniest of the videos, the son dealing with his chicken phobia. Or his dad, rather, helping him deal with his chicken phobia.
I think he senses your fear. Get over there and face him.
Dad.
No, get over there and face him. You can't run from him. He's going to win. Yeah, win it! Win it! Yeah! Yeah! Win it! Win it! Yeah!
So as you can imagine, the commenters are split on whether or not this is child abuse or, proper child rearing. So let's just take the cruelty out of it, okay? Just pragmatically, how do you deal with the phobia? The answer always is exposure. In fact, I would argue the answer for most anxiety is at some level exposure. What the dad's doing here is we would call that flooding, right? We sort of fall into two buckets. One bucket is what we call flooding, which is where you expose yourself to whatever the stressor is and your body reacts in a very negative way, but your body can't maintain the symptoms of anxiety forever, right? Your heart rate can't skyrocket forever, your blood pressure can't skyrocket forever, and eventually you will downregulate and you will no longer be as afraid of whatever it is that you're phobic of. So for example, if you're afraid of snakes and I throw you into a pit of snakes like Indiana Jones, you will freak out you will freak out initially, but eventually your body will calm down, that anxiety will reduce, and your phobia will dissipate. Now, the problem with flooding is it's very uncomfortable. So this kid here is afraid of this rooster, and so his dad puts him in the chicken coop and lets the rooster run after him. And the kid is, in every way, feeling very alarmed, right? But if you watch the video, the rooster chases him, the kid kicks and screams, and eventually there's a point where the kid goes, I'm tired, right? He runs out of energy. And if you were to measure his level of distress in that moment versus when the rooster first ran after him, you would say, he's less anxious now. So that's flooding. A nicer way to deal with this would be systematic desensitization. So instead of throwing his son into the chicken coop, the father could have said, hey, let's walk to the chicken coop, and I want you to stand on the outside of the chicken coop. And the son, looking at the rooster, would probably feel some distress. And the dad would make his son sit there until that anxiety level dropped, because eventually it would drop. Then he would move his son to the corner inside the chicken coop, but far away from the rooster. The son would be really distressed, and then the anxiety would drop. Then the father may grab a chicken, not the rooster, a nicer chicken, and hold the chicken next to the son. Son's anxiety would go up, eventually it would go down. And then maybe he makes the son touch the chicken. Anxiety goes up, and then eventually it would go down, right? You could systematically and methodically move the son closer and closer and closer to the rooster until at some point the son's able to hold the rooster, hear the rooster crow, see the rooster, blow up its feathers, and not experience distress. I'll tell you, this is off track, but when I was in grad school, my master's program, I really wanted to get into a doc program, and I needed to do research. And I was at USC, and I was going around trying to find some professor that would take me as a research assistant or whatever. No one wanted me, except for somebody. His name was Stan Huey Jr., and he studied, based on different backgrounds and cultures, what's the fastest way to desensitize someone to their phobia. And so the first one I had to work on was a spider phobia. And so he just put me in a room with a spider and said, you need to make yourself comfortable. And he gave me a protocol, which started off with me looking at the spider, in the terrarium, poking it with a pen, touching it with a finger, picking it up in a glass, dropping it on top of my hand with a Kleenex on top of my hand first, then dropping it without the Kleenex. By the end of a 2-3 hour period, I was able to pick up spiders on my own, 2 of them, and put them in my hair, and then look in a mirror and watch the spiders crawl around my head. And that process is called systematic desensitization. You can't be anxious forever, so eventually you will calm down in the face of whatever it is that you're phobic of. So here's what I'll say about this particular parenting strategy. I thought it was fun. I would be lying if I said I didn't think it was funny. I think it is funny, and it is cruel. There is a nicer way to get your son comfortable with a rooster, right? Probably not as fast, though. If you are looking for more intentional mental health treatment, it's a good segue to our sponsor, BetterHelp. As you can imagine, I am thrilled that BetterHelp is sponsoring this video. I have worked in the mental health field since 2005, almost 20 years. And the number one question I get is, hey, David, how do I find the right therapist? And I think there's usually 3 barriers to entry. One is just proximity to a therapist. Traditionally, people had to meet in person, and if you didn't live by a therapist, it was difficult to access one. Another barrier is finding a therapist that you stylistically align with. How do you find a therapist that you connect to? And then lastly, how do you know whether or not your therapist has the skills and competencies that you need? And BetterHelp addresses all of those barriers. First, you don't have to meet with the therapist in person. You're able to meet with them using your computer or your phone. You can do video chat, voice calls, or even messaging. Also, when you sign up for BetterHelp, you complete an online questionnaire, and BetterHelp pairs you with a therapist that stylistically aligns with your needs. And maybe most importantly, all of the therapists that work with BetterHelp are licensed therapists. So you know that they have the qualifications and the competencies required to really support you. And I should also say, because of the ease of finding a therapist via BetterHelp, I think it allows people to move through therapists more appropriately. One of my biggest sort of gripes with therapy is somebody meets a therapist, they don't connect with them, and then they feel stuck. With BetterHelp, you are able to transition from one therapist to another when your needs aren't being met. So you can really treat it like a service and make sure that you are fully supported. So if you're interested in finding a therapist that can support you from the comfort of your home, I really recommend you try out BetterHelp. And because you are a member of the PopPsych YouTube audience, BetterHelp will offer a special discount if you put in my promo code. So go to betterhelp.com/PopPsych, or you can select my channel name, PopPsych, from one of the drop-down menus. Again, really check it out. I think it's a wonderful service that makes therapy so much more accessible. Now, back to the video. All right, now this clip I thought was really interesting, concerning but interesting, from a political commentator named Pearl. Super popular on YouTube.
I watched this pastor on YouTube, and it was like the woman went up to her husband, or the pastor, and said, like, me and my husband keep arguing. And the pastor says, well, why are you arguing with your husband? It's like, he's your boss, right? You wouldn't, if my employee's arguing with me, I just fire the employee. But like, it goes, and what I realized is I'm like, oh my gosh, arguing with a man implies that you guys are equal. Yeah. And that's what all the problems are from, is like, we think that we are equal when men are literally better at everything, even cooking and raising kids.
When I first heard it, I thought, okay, she's very smart. She puts out this provocative content. People click on it. They get angry. I react to it, right? And the engagement must be off the charts on her videos. And she's making a fortune on people's distress. And she's a smart woman. There's no way she actually believes it. But then I watched more of her videos, and my perception is that I think she's well-intended, and I think she does believe what she's saying. I guess I have so many reactions to it. I'm just going to vent for a minute, probably more than a minute. Okay, number one, you do not need to stay in a long-term relationship with your boss. You don't live with your boss. You don't raise a family with your boss. So the idea that we're like, oh, well, challenging your husband is like challenging your boss, and you would never challenge your boss, is a ludicrous comparison. Unless, of course, you would like to create a work environment at home. If you want your husband to pay you, and you're just a maid around the house, and you're just offering services to make him happy, then that makes sense. But I think for most people, they don't want to live a life where they have to just work all the time. So the comparison is silly. And the second thought I had is, like, why would she do this? I get that she makes a lot of money off of it, but why? It's like, psychologically, why does somebody buy in to an ideology where they believe they are inferior. And my sense is that it's comforting for her to think that she doesn't have to make any big decisions and that somebody else will take care of her. Let me say it this way. I don't think that Pearl thinks that, because my sense is that Pearl is a very independent woman who has created this entire YouTube channel around how women should be in traditional relationships. So like her own behavior deviates from what she's selling here. But I wonder if some people look at it and go, that's the way we should live, because then I won't have any pressure for making independent decisions. I just rely on my husband, and all I have to do is cook and clean and fall into these sort of traditional gender norms. And then I thought, I wish Pearl would know. There's this like sort of underbelly of the internet that is pushing the idea of a high value man and a high value woman. And I think it's sort of it's the Gen Z sort of age bucket that are talking like this. And what I want to tell those people is the only people in our population that think about themselves as high value or low value are people that don't have value right now, right? If you're a 50-year-old man and you're established and you have a family, you don't give a shit about whether or not people think you're high value or low value. To me, high value versus low value is low value thinking, because you obviously don't. If you're concerned about your value, you've not proven it to yourself. So it's like we're aiming at this sort of immature population, and my concern is that there are people on the internet that are serving men and women that are younger and saying, this is how you be a strong male, or this is how you be a high value woman. And it's just distorting, it's limiting people's ability to grow. I don't know, my thoughts are scattered here. To say it more concisely, I think it's very limiting for someone to think that their value is dependent on how the opposite sex feels about them. And I could look at it like I do with Andrew Tate. I look at it and go, nobody in the world is going to listen to this. It's a 0 on my give a shit scale, moving on. The problem is the people that are listening to it are the ones that don't know themselves. And so they are also the people that are the most influenced by this kind of stuff. And I wish there was some way to provide a healthier, more balanced view of what makes somebody successful. Okay, moving on to Tom Sandoval. So Tom Sandoval cannot stop stepping in it. He had an interview where he was saying his experience in the media was similar to that of O.J. Simpson and George Floyd. And people, as you can imagine, reacted and said, wait a second, in what way do you think your experience is like that of George Floyd? That definitely wasn't his intention. And I even would argue, if you look at what he said, it's hard to shoehorn that interpretation into what he said. If he was equating himself to George Floyd, then he was also equating himself to O.J. Simpson, right? One person was a victim, one person was a perpetrator, you may argue a perpetrator, right? So I think it's clear that he wasn't trying to say, I'm one of these people. What he's trying to say is the media attention was akin to that, which I actually think is equally stupid. The media coverage was nowhere near as significant in his case as those two really, really poignant moments in our history. But I think in his mind, because he views things all about him, he feels like his affair and the media coverage was in some way similar. And it just simply wasn't. Those two events changed the culture. They changed the cultural landscape in the United States. Tom Sandoval's affair was annoying and provocative and interesting to some. It did not change our culture. So it just shows his egocentrism and naivete. Now, the last one I want to talk about is Meri Brown, who is leaning into her entrepreneurial spirit and has started a new community, a new business and a new community called Worthy Up. So what this is, it is an online community where women get together. I don't know if it's just by gender, but it seems like it's all about women get together and work on self-improvement. So here's what I'm reacting to. People are pushing back. There's a well-known influencer that has an account on Instagram called Without a Crystal Ball. She also has a very successful YouTube channel, and she is saying that Meri is starting a cult. And, the implication is that Meri came from a cult because she's from the Brown family, and she's doing it again, and now she's going to be the figurehead. Meri is charging that to have a lifetime membership as part of Worthy Up. It's $149. Right now, you can get it for $99. And people like Without a Crystal Ball are saying, this is just a vague description of a community that I'm going to lead, and therefore it is a cult. I don't think that's what it is. If you remember, Meri got catfished, right? She was online looking for relationships, connection. She wasn't getting it as part of the Brown family, and she got catfished. She got mistreated by somebody. I think Meri, at that time of her life, would have loved to have been part of a community where there are like-minded women that she could have connected with. I bet you that was the sort of impetus for creating this. And if you look at the description of what you get as, if you're a member of Worthy Up, this is essentially her creating a Patreon, right? Patreon is a way for creators like me to create an account. You as my audience could log on, and I'll give you special videos or get you part of a newsletter or whatever extra that I can charge you for. You could do that via Patreon and give a portion of it to Patreon, or if you're very well known, like Meri Brown, you can create Worthy Up. Now, she doesn't have to share any of the revenue with Patreon, and people that join this get weekly videos from Meri Brown. That's the real sort of tangible thing that she is offering. And she's saying, let's create a community. And I have to say, as a creator, that is always the goal. So like right now, I'm largely on YouTube. If YouTube shuts me down or I stop making YouTube videos, I lose connection with all of my audience. It would serve me to have a newsletter, to have a Patreon, to have other avenues to create a connection with my audience so that as I move and do different things in my life, I can keep my audience. So to me, it's a very intentional move on Meri's part to, right as Sister Wives is sort of coming to a close, right as she's stepping out of the family, she's kind of saying, how do I get my arms around my audience so that I can monetize this audience, I can stay connected to this audience, and I can help this audience work together. So to me, she's not saying I have all the answers. What she's saying is, I'm going to try and get people to come here to give you insight into personal development and relationships and those kinds of things. To me, it feels well-intended, and it's just someone trying to create a community. I will say, it would feel better if it didn't cost $150 to be part of this community. And it does feel like what you're getting for being part of the community, I'm not sure it's worth $150. As of yet, the website is exceptionally vague. It's not complete, so you don't really know who's going to be speaking, how many videos you're going to get, what are the extra services, it's sort of you're trusting her to create the community at this point. So, and I should say, I'm not surprised. I think it's been really clear over the last 6 months that Meri has moved into, if you look at her Instagram, she is moving away from being the lonely sister wife to being somebody who focuses on personal development and female empowerment. So I think this lines up well, and I wish her the best. So that's how I view it. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm interested in how you view the Worthy Up program that Meri has created. Is she taking advantage of people, or is it just smart business? Let me know what you think. And as always, I want to thank my sponsor for today's video, BetterHelp.